I've said earlier on that in 2013, the African Union adopted the theme silencing the guns in Africa. Guns are getting louder in Africa. We see what is happening in Mozambique. We see what is happening in the Democratic Republic of Congo. We're talking about it with Comrade Serge yesterday. We see the conflict in Sudan. We've been recording videos about what is happening in Sudan. We have Dr. Elgon, Dr. Abdul Karim Elgon. He has been working in Lesotho. He is a medical specialist as an advisor to the Minister of Health, but is also part of the people that are trying to bring peace in Sudan. We've invited him to come and speak to us for about 15 to 20 minutes. And I forgot earlier on to welcome those that are following us on our social media platforms. We thank you. Let's keep following. Dr. Elgon, we give you about 20 minutes to explain to us what is happening in Sudan. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Comrade Madena. Greetings, everyone.
May I also request that we keep our phones silent, please. Let's not have a phone ringing. Just take out your phone and put it on silent. Thanks.
I'm really happy that today we are together here celebrating Africa Day. And I really congratulate the African Diaspora Forum for annually and for the last maybe 10 years annually celebrating the Africa Day. This is something that we need, and we need to focus on it so that we can bring Africa together. And I'm also happy about the presentation that was done earlier by Dr. Davis, the previous Minister of Trade, trying to focus the possibilities that can happen in Africa if we pull our resources together. We know Africa is rich and has expertise, not only within Africa, but also within the diaspora. And if we put hands together within Africa and the diaspora, a lot of things could happen. I am happy to be presenting to you today something about my country, Sudan. And whatever I wanted to share with you, we hope that we get lessons from what's happening in Sudan so that we don't allow it to happen in other African countries. Until 1973, the Sudanese pound was equal to 3.3 US dollars. And then we had a military coup. Jafar Nimeri was the military dictator in Sudan, and during his time, the Sudanese pounds lost its power. But until 1984, the Sudanese revolted against Nimeri, and they had a transitional government for 2 years, and then they had a free and fair election that brought the late Sadiq al-Mahdi to power. His party was the winning party. And he ruled from 1986 to 1989. There was 1 year remaining where the second elections would happen, and the Sudanese people would have seen what parties have done, and they will choose their favorite one that has the better plans. But unfortunately, the military were unhappy about this, so they had a coup in 1989. And hundreds of people were taken to security jails, including myself. I stayed 7 months in jail, security jails. And this is how I ended in Southern Africa. They confiscated my passport, and I got a United Nations volunteer job with United Nations as the UN medical officer in Lesotho. And when I came here, I fell in love with Southern Africa, and this is here. Still, I am here. Just to give you an example, when the military were in Sudan, the 1 Sudanese pound was equal to, the $1 was equal to 6 Sudanese pounds. In June 1889. Today, $1 is equal to 6,000 Sudanese pounds. And this is why the discussion of Dr. Davis about the Pan-African trade is very important for all of us. The military coup of al-Bashir and the Muslim Brotherhood in 1989 was one of the great nightmares in Sudanese history, because it did not only destroy the economy, it destroyed the social structures of Sudan, it brought rivalry between the army, the Sudanese army, and the people. The Sudanese army in 30 years has killed thousands. All of them are Sudanese citizens. Actually, to me, the Sudanese army is the only army that was trained to kill its citizens. It has never protected the country, because as we speak, there are 3 areas in Sudan that are occupied by neighboring countries. But that is not the only problem. The problem is that corruption, loss of human resources. When the military decided to bring people by loyalty. So if you are not loyal to them, you lose the job. And within 1 year, almost 50% of the public sector professionals lost their jobs. And millions of Sudanese have to leave the country, looking for ways of how to survive and how to keep their families alive. And this affected especially the youth and the new university graduates. Thousands of them have to leave Sudan. And during this struggle to live, many of them died either in the Libyan desert or in the Mediterranean Sea. At the same time, the movement against the military government in Sudan has not stopped. Myself being here, we are interconnected with Sudanese all over the world to try to do how can we resist this country, how can we, and you remember when al-Bashir came here, how the work that we have been doing made him run away with his tail between his legs. Most of this is part of the Sudanese who are in the diaspora trying to resist dictatorship in Africa, because we know dictatorship is not allowing Africa to move forward. Then it was too much for the Southern Sudanese to continue in a military government. And this is how South Sudan seceded. And we had now 2 countries, 2 Sudans instead of 1 Sudan for more than 50 years. This gives you an indication of how dictatorship and military rule can do to an African country. But not all the South have seceded, but they were not satisfied yet. They started the war in Darfur that have killed more than 300,000 people in Darfur and have made millions either displaced or refugees. Of course, when you have insecurity, production stops, investment stops, and the bad economy not affects the government only, it affects everyone. And the Sudanese went from the richest country in Africa in 1960s to one of the poorest countries in Africa in the 2000s because of what has happened in Sudan. But the problem is this, as my colleague from Zimbabwe have said it earlier, that it is the elite who are benefiting from situations like this. The elite wanted to keep the privilege they have had from the military regimes, so the resistance was too much, the rebellion is all over the country, the army cannot manage it alone, they decided to create militias to fight on their behalf. And those militias were given a lot of resources to fight their own people. They were created on tribal basis first, so that one tribe will kill the other tribe. But then, as things move forward, they found that they cannot continue like this. They tried to legalize those militias. So they created a military arm of the army through the law. They went to parliament, they enacted a law that was signed by the president of the country, creating what is called the Rapid Support Forces as an arm of the military. And they said it is not different because Russia has that force, America has that force, all European countries has other forces, Israel has other forces that support the national army. And they gave this rapid support forces a sort of a legality. So whenever al-Bashir speaks of the army, he will say the army and the rapid support forces. Whoever speaks will speak as of the Sudanese army as two arms, the military and the rapid support forces, and have been working hand in hand all those years, until we had our youth who decided, instead of dying in the desert and in the Mediterranean, that they will make the revolution boil. And it boiled up in 2018, and we overthrew al-Bashir. And we brought in a civilian government. But because of the grip of the military on everything in Sudan, the universities as military universities, the companies are military companies, everything actually is in the grip of that. We couldn't have a civilian government alone. We have to do a way of managing it together for a transition between the civilian and the military until we have elections. But immediately when they felt that elections are going to happen, they had the first military coup in October 2021. And they took the prime minister of the civilian government to security jails and all his ministers, and they succeeded in bringing in a full military rule again back. But during this time, the rapid support forces found that their fortunes will be better if they sided with the civilians. So the rapid support force general said, I am no longer supporting a military government in Sudan. I am in full support of the civilian rule, and let us go for civilian rule. Immediately when he said this, the military was unhappy about those statements. And a division started happening between the two army, generals. And when this happened, the army general decided to take it to the second coup, which was last month. In April last month, they had their second coup, where they attacked the military forces of their brother and friend and whatever you can call it, the rapid support forces. And we went into war. This war, in Khartoum alone, I think we lost more than 1,000 civilians. I am counting civilians, we are not counting military. Military, maybe more than 20 or 30,000 have died during this time, in 1 month. And people are counting. As I am standing here, maybe some are dying in Sudan. And we regret that very badly, especially civilians. Not only this, actually more than 1 million Sudanese are either displaced or are refugees in Egypt or Saudi Arabia or the other neighboring countries like Chad and the Central African Republic. So this dilemma, this insecurity, when we think of the presentation, the first presentation, insecurity is the best enemy of poverty. Because when there is insecurity, there is no production. I want just to give you an example. Hamdok, when he presented his first budget, he said openly, my citizens, it is true I am the Prime Minister, but I have to give you facts. My government is in charge of only 12% of the GDP of Sudan. 88% of GDP of Sudan is controlled by the military companies. And my first job to do is to see how can I move the ownership of those military companies to be controlled by the national budget, national treasury. he was unable to do this because the military were adamant no one is going to control the companies that they have been running for the last 30 years. This is the dilemma we are in. The Sudanese are now fighting against two military. The military of Sudan that has been trained that they have to rule for life. When you go to the military school, you are trained. You are the coming leader of Sudan. And with the support forces, which is a militia that is legalized. It's legal. And then we have to choose between which is legal, but which is supporting the transition to a civilian rule. And we, the Sudanese, are put by the choice of those two military arms that are fighting on the ground and from the sky, and we don't know what to do. When I was a child, where my grandmother used to tell me a story of a bird. That bird gives only one egg a year. And she says that egg, if you take it, it will kill your father. If you don't take it, it will kill your mother. So it is called the egg of the bird in Kititi. The bird is called Kititi. We haven't seen this bird. But anyway, the thing is like this. If you take it, it kills your mother. If you don't take it, it kills your father. So both decisions are difficult for us. So now as Sudanese, if we support the army, we are supporting a destruction of Sudan because this is a tried and tested army that have destroyed the country. And if we said we support the rapid support forces, we know what we are getting. And the decision is difficult. Anyway, to cut a story short, 2 days ago, we had a short ceasefire, a 1 week ceasefire, that was done by our neighbors, the Saudis and the Americans. It is not holding, but anyway, we are not distressed because there were more than 10 ceasefires before that did not hold. But at least this one is not as violent as the previous ones, and we hope that maybe in a week it will hold. And if it holds, Sudan is very rich. Rich in its people. There are millions of Sudanese graduates who are working all over the world, expatriates. There are thousands of Sudanese within Sudan. Sudan has a lot of resources. The most important resource we have is water, where we have the blue and the white Nile. We have the river Nile. We have hundreds of tributaries of those two rivers. Agriculture is the main thing that we will focus on. Food is needed by everyone, and this will be the focus of our civilian government that we will expect will take over, hopefully, before the end of this year. And if we did that, we are following on the discussion that we have had this morning, that we will push towards the free African trade, because there will be a lot of good things for us, for Sudan and for neighboring countries. It is not only agriculture. I want just to give you an example. I come from a rural, a nomadic tribe, and we are called the Baggara. Baggara means the cattle herders. We are about 2 million people, but we have more than 6 million heads of cattle. When I went to my chiefs and I said to them, Holland have only 2 million heads of cattle, but they are getting more than $50 billion out of those. We have 6 million heads of cattle, and we are paying our cattle through non-education, non-development. We are paying our cattle more than 2 billion a year, I estimate. So instead of our cattle paying us, like what is happening in Holland or happening in New Zealand, we are paying our cattle, because we are following the cattle in a non-economic relationship. Women cannot get health and die, children cannot get health and dying, cannot get education, and this creates perpetual poverty. So for us as Sudanese, our best bet is for this war to end and for us to have a civilian government that allows exchange of power peacefully, that allows development, that allows investment, that allows Sudan to join hands with countries in Africa that would follow on the policies that will allow a Pan-African trade and allow development of Africa, and that my children and grandchildren will never be standing here to try and tell you the war in Sudan is destroying us. I want my children and grandchildren to stand in front of people as an African wherever they go, in south or east or west or north, and say, we are proud Africans. Our Africa is completely different from the Africa that my father and grandfather have lived in. Thank you very much.